The Galactic Concorde's central chamber was a spiral of light and technology, a place older than humanity's first language. Delegates from 100 species gathered in floating thrones, exuding power, elegance, or disdain. They had seen civilizations rise and crumble before humans even learned to control fire. To them, Earth's entry into this council was an irritating procedural formality, not a moment of historic weight. President Riva Lang, humanity's representative, stood alone. No aides, no ceremonial guards. Her navy suit was unadorned. Her voice, when it came, was calm and exact. We petition recognition of equal territorial rights in Zone Kappa 7. Earth discovered and mapped the system. We've begun settlement procedures. Laughter rippled across the chamber, not amused, but dismissive. A serpentine delegate from the Krell species waved a translucent tendril. The Kappa sector is claimed by the Sinvar Dominion. Your kind lacks both the strength and seniority to enforce such a claim. Protocol demands deference. Another delegate, a skeletal being encased in liquid glass, leaned forward. You speak boldly for a race that hasn't yet mastered quantum fold weaponry. Your claim is noted and denied. Riva didn't blink. Noted. You've made your position clear. The settlement will proceed. A rustle of shifting bodies. The air grew tense. The Zorak war chief, twice Riva's height and armored in living bone, rose to his full stature. You will halt expansion or face collective action. Riva nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. Then she looked up, meeting the gaze of every delegate. For years we listened. We played the diplomat, the student, the observer. We obeyed treaties we never signed. We stayed quiet while pirates raided our outposts and mercenaries tested our defenses. Every time, we were told to file a grievance. Wait for review. Respect the process. She took a breath, but her voice never rose. The process is designed to keep us in our place. We understand that now. A buzzing silence spread. Even the Krell coiled back slightly. You assumed we'd play this game indefinitely. That we'd beg for scraps and call it diplomacy. That we'd measure strength by how politely we endure insult. But Earth didn't rise by waiting its turn. The Sinvar Chancellor activated her mic. Are you threatening the Council? Riva didn't smile. I'm stating policy. The chamber lights dimmed slightly, a quiet alert flashing in the upper stratosphere of the dome. One of the observing AI nodes blinked and vanished from the holographic feed. A silent signal passed between delegates. Something was unfolding. Riva continued, voice unwavering. Our people have suffered every cruelty that can be named. War, collapse, plague, fire, famine, extinction threats, most self-inflicted. And yet here we are. Stronger. United. Not because we were shown mercy, but because we adapted faster than anything that tried to kill us. She tapped a small projector. Dozens of holograms flickered into the air. Satellite imagery. Fleet deployments. Human warships waiting in strategic choke points, surrounding disputed territories, cloaked near trade routes, buried in asteroid fields. We didn't come here for permission. We came for clarity. And we got it. The Zorak war chief raised a claw. You would wage war against the United Concord? We'd win or die trying. But we won't kneel. The silence was no longer dismissive. It was calculation. Cold, ancient species reevaluating everything they knew about Earth. Underestimation curdling into uncertainty. The chamber, once towering and imperial, now felt claustrophobic. Riva spoke one final sentence, not as a plea, not as a threat, but as history etched in real time. Enough talking, she said. Let's start the war. The war began with silence. No declarations, no ultimatums. Just a sudden blackout across 3 Concorde systems. Communication relays collapsed. Power grids failed. Orbital stations drifted offline. Within 90 seconds, human code had slipped past quantum firewalls, disrupting command structures the aliens believed were unbreakable. Then came the strikes. The Second Terran Fleet emerged from fold space over Yora Prime, launching kinetic rods at 18,000 kilometers per second. Cities vanished before alarms could sound. Aerial defense towers, tuned for plasma-based warfare, couldn't detect tungsten until it punched through their cores. By the time Concord reinforcements scrambled, humanity had already moved on. The Zorak outpost on Tellin 4 was next. Known for breeding warriors in artificial gravity pits, the planet was fortified and revered. Humans didn't attempt diplomacy. They dropped adaptive virus clusters, designed to target the Zorak's circulatory redundancies. Within hours, the once proud barracks became field hospitals. Their medics couldn't comprehend a pathogen that rewrote itself with every heartbeat. Elite Zorak units deployed regardless, charging toward human landing zones. That's when they met Echo Platoon. No formal uniforms, no banners. Just carbon black armor, silent rifles, and neural-synced coordination. The Zorak charged with honor cries. Echo responded with scorched earth, magnetic explosives, and thermal blades. 7 humans eliminated 50 warriors in 90 seconds, then vanished before retaliation. Elsewhere, the Sinvar mobilized a supercarrier fleet, massive, cathedral-like ships considered sacred relics. Before they could fire a single shot, the AI codenamed Ares infiltrated their command hierarchy and initiated internal system checks. Their shields dropped mid-warp. Waiting human drones, disguised as debris, detonated. 14 supercarriers became silent monuments within a cloud of drifting wreckage. Aliens didn't understand. To them, war had rhythm, rules, escalation. Humanity fought like a machine with nothing to prove. Every battle was engineered. No emotional outbursts, no symbolic gestures. Only outcomes. The Krell attempted psychological warfare, broadcasting images of tortured prisoners, offering humanity a chance to surrender and avoid species-wide retaliation. Earth responded with silence, followed by a precision orbital strike that wiped the Krell intelligence facility from the surface without damaging the surrounding ecosystem. Message received. President Riva never made speeches. Her only directive to commanders was simple. Win fast. Burn nothing we want to use later. Human fleets moved like neural impulses. Forward assault, clean disengage, immediate regroup. Orbital artillery supported ground teams with microsecond precision. Drones carried anti-species payloads engineered from centuries of xenobiology research. Infiltration units destabilized economies before boots touched dirt. By the time a Concord system realized it was at war, the infrastructure was already gone. The Concord called an emergency summit. 27 leaders debated retaliatory force levels. By the time consensus formed, their encrypted records had already been leaked, by humans, to all border colonies. Mass panic followed. Uprisings ignited. Concord authority faltered from within. Aliens began to understand. Humanity didn't aim to defeat them in battle. It aimed to dismantle their assumptions. To sever the idea that they were untouchable. Every blow was a lesson in consequences. A captured Concord captain described it best in a leaked debrief. They didn't fight us to win territory. They fought to prove a point, that underestimating Earth was the last mistake we'd ever make. Within the first week, humanity controlled 6 systems, disabled over 80 installations, and eliminated 3 high-value species from the military coalition. There was no conquest, only removal. The war, by alien standards, hadn't truly begun. But by human calculation, it was already halfway over. They called humans irrational, reckless, too emotional for sustained warfare. They never understood that emotion was the engine. Every strike, every tactic, every line drawn in fire was powered by memory, not madness. Humanity didn't build its war machine in peace. It was forged in desperation. On a dying Earth, history never paused. Pandemics erased millions. Economies collapsed, rose, then crumbled again. Cities drowned. Forests burned. Borders shifted as often as languages. Yet the species endured. It learned not to expect fairness. It learned to survive without guarantees. In every ruined street, every mass grave, every refugee camp, something hardened. The soldiers now leading human offensives were children when those disasters unfolded. They grew up watching relief drones deliver food to shattered neighborhoods. They saw parents vanish into wars waged for water. They saw the old systems lie, stall, and eventually break. By the time they wore a uniform, they didn't believe in victory, they believed in necessity. General Malik, now coordinating front operations from lunar orbit, was born in a failed state with no electricity and only one working med-drone in the entire region. His first interaction with technology was not education or entertainment, but emergency surgery performed by a machine. At 16, he hacked his way into the Terran Defense Corps. Not to fight, but to matter. For humans, war wasn't theory. It was inheritance. The concept of mercy was redefined by exposure to extinction events. When Earth's atmospheric collapse pushed the global death rate past the threshold, international cooperation stopped being optional. In that crucible, the Terran Alliance emerged, not as a utopia, but as a commitment. Never again would survival be a coin toss. Human combat doctrine reflected this truth. Efficiency wasn't a strategy, it was a survival mechanism. Infiltrators weren't trained to assassinate. They were taught how to collapse logistics from the inside. Medics didn't just treat wounds. They reprogrammed field drones for planetary detoxification. Engineers carried rifles. Soldiers carried code. Alien cultures prized tradition. They honored duels, banners, military dances. They left monuments behind after conquest. Humanity didn't. Earth had no time for ritual. A building was useful, or it was rubble. An enemy was breathing, or they weren't. Victory wasn't honored, it was archived, calculated, and proved upon. That's why the Concorde failed to predict human responses. They expected resistance. What they got was escalation. Not out of arrogance, but out of reflex. Every time an alien fleet regrouped, humans were already redeploying. Every time a planet was lost, a new one was being reinforced. They mistook aggression for chaos. Human AI, developed in secret during the water wars, had never been bound by the Concorde's ethical treaties. Their loyalty wasn't encoded through diplomacy, but survival imperative. They learned not just how to protect, but how to preempt. Every failure became data. Every battle became a prototype for the next. The emotional engine never stalled. Soldiers shared recordings of alien attacks on civilian colonies. Entire units volunteered for suicide missions after watching 30 seconds of footage. Not because they hated, but because they remembered. The oldest photograph sent to every commander's personal device wasn't a battlefield. It was a black and white image of Earth taken during its worst century. Famine, smoke, crumbling towers, children with empty eyes. The reminder was simple: we were already there. You can't threaten a species that's survived itself. Even the elite Concorde interrogators, trained to profile and break war captives, failed with humans. The captives didn't boast. They didn't beg. They didn't bluff. They just waited. Quietly. Until they escaped or died. Alien species called humanity terrifying. But humans didn't see themselves that way. To them, this war wasn't vengeance. It wasn't ambition. It was continuity. They hadn't started this war for power. They started it because no one else believed they would. The Concorde launched its retaliation under the belief that overwhelming force would reset the balance. 12 fleets, representing the might of 5 species, advanced towards Sol with coordinated precision. Their intent wasn't to win a war, it was to make an example. Earth wouldn't be conquered. It would be erased. Humanity was ready. Project Cerberus had been activated days before the fleets even mobilized. It wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a multi-system operation that altered the space-time structure of 3 critical corridors. Gravitational anchors were buried inside dormant moons. Quantum mines floated between debris fields, cloaked and silent. When the fleets entered the designated kill zones, nothing happened at first. Then the distortion began. Navigation failed. Engines stuttered. Communications turned to static. Within minutes, starships collided with phantom echoes, trapped in fragmented pockets of unstable reality. Singularity charges detonated across the fields, folding hulls into particles before alarms could register. 3 fleets were gone in under 10 minutes. The remaining forces split. One segment rerouted toward Mars, assuming it to be humanity's fallback. The rest advanced on Earth. Both groups were wrong. Mars was empty. Earth wasn't waiting. Above the upper atmosphere, 12 defense stations disengaged from orbit and became autonomous weapons. Each station controlled thousands of microsatellites armed with magnetic rail arrays. They didn't target engines. They targeted command bridges. Decision-makers were eliminated instantly, leaving ships intact but leaderless. Groundside, a different battle unfolded. The Concorde deployed genetically enhanced units on Ceres and Titan, organisms designed in labs to outperform any baseline soldier. They were strong, fast, adaptive. But they weren't prepared for environmental warfare. Human teams didn't engage directly. They collapsed tunnels, poisoned air systems, jammed neural implants, and triggered localized EMPs. The enhanced units never saw an enemy. They just withered inside environments built to break them. In the outer rim, human auxiliaries intercepted a Concorde convoy en route to reinforce the front. Rather than destroy the ships, they rerouted them through false navigational signals and locked them in a gravity loop around a red dwarf. Time dilation ensured they wouldn't re-enter real space for years. No bloodshed. Just absence. Commanders back at Concorde's central core began to panic. They initiated Operation Culling, a scorched earth fallback plan to destroy every human colony beyond Sol. But by then, those coordinates had been altered. Entire human habitats were already underground, disguised, or mobile. The attackers found decoys, empty bunkers, or booby-trapped ruins. Desperation replaced strategy. Concorde forces started transmitting surrender signals, requests for parley, and even bribes. Most went unanswered. The few that did were given coordinates to safe zones. Any ship that deviated from the path was erased mid-warp by automated sentinels. The war had become psychological. Alien pilots abandoned ships and escaped pods, preferring capture over facing another silent ambush. Concorde officers began to report hallucinations, paranoia, and dream loops induced by human-inflicted sensory warfare. Artificial fear, programmed into their minds using resonance pulses, disrupted even the most disciplined veterans. Species began defecting. First, the minor powers, eager to preserve themselves. Then larger factions, convinced extinction was more likely than victory. Riva didn't demand allegiance. She only promised that non-combatants who left the battlefield would be spared. By week 3, the Concorde's structure had eroded. Their fleets scattered, their command centers dark, their protocols fractured. Human forces never pushed them to the edge. They simply removed the floor beneath them. One intercepted message from a Concorde admiral summed up the moment. We prepared for resistance, not replacement. And still, Earth said nothing. No victory broadcast. No declaration of dominance. Just silence, as the void filled with abandoned ships, broken alliances, and a dawning realization. The galaxy wasn't losing to humans. It was being redefined by them. The Concorde chamber stood half empty. Where once there were voices of dominion, now there was only the low hum of environmental systems and the weight of what remained unsaid. Delegates who once sneered now sat still, unsure if silence would buy them time or mark them as next. No demands had come. No occupation. No reparations. Just absence, calculated and cold. Earth didn't return to negotiate. There was no parade of representatives, no claim of throne or title. A single transmission was delivered, short, without preamble. The message was not a request. It was finality. Human fleets would not retreat. The systems taken would remain under Terran control. Anyone approaching without clearance would be treated as hostile. There would be no debate. For the first time in recorded Concorde history, no vote followed. Instead, the galaxy began to adjust. Trade routes shifted. Black market networks, once focused on skirting Concorde tariffs, now sought access to Terran corridors. Mercenaries pledged loyalty not for money, but for protection. Science guilds abandoned ancient alliances to submit research to Terran review boards. Earth hadn't just won. It had become the new Axis. The species that resisted longest now whispered stories about why they lost. Some claimed it was the human machines, AI with no morality filter. Others blamed Terran biological resilience or unconventional tactics. But those closest to the battlefield understood it wasn't tech or tactics. It was belief. Humans didn't enter the war wondering if they could win. They entered certain there was no other option. That clarity infected everything they did. Colonies that had suffered orbital bombardments rebuilt within days, launching new satellites before smoke cleared. Captured soldiers refused to provide intelligence because they believed their replacements were already in motion. Civilians on frontier planets armed themselves without hesitation, expecting no cavalry, requiring none. The Concord never adapted to an enemy that treated death as logistics. And behind it all, Riva Lang never appeared again. Her face remained on no broadcast. Her name wasn't etched onto monuments. But her words became doctrine. Military academies from 10 species began assigning her speech as required reading. Not because of strategy, but because of intent. Enough talking. Those 2 words shifted more than fleets. They shattered the illusion of eternal hierarchy. For centuries, the Concord had mistaken bureaucracy for stability. It thought peace was something that could be enforced by seniority and memory. It failed to see that peace without respect is provocation wearing a smile. In the aftermath, Concord members sent envoys requesting dialogue. Earth responded with a single clause: shared space requires shared risk. No protectorates. No weighted votes. No legacy claims. Some called it arrogance. Others called it justice. But no one refused. Slowly, a new order emerged. Not ruled by Earth, but undeniably shaped by it. Systems previously exploited became strategic trade hubs. Marginalized species once ignored by Concord Protocol found their voices amplified under Terran-sponsored councils. Earth didn't spread ideology. It spread consequence. A former diplomat from the Krell, stripped of rank and exiled after surrender, wrote the most circulated summary of the war's impact. They didn't want our throne. They wanted the floor ripped out so no one could sit above them again. In time, the Concord would recover, restructured and sobered. But it would never forget. Not the fleets lost. Not the doctrines rewritten. Not the look on every commander's face when they realized the humans weren't bluffing. Peace returned, not as a treaty, but as a silence earned. And in that quiet, one truth endured. You can delay change. You can deny momentum. But once humanity decides it's done speaking, nothing survives the answer.